Well, welcome to Saturday afternoon on the sofas. No, this might grow on me, the idea of being in a comfortable seat. I sometimes think that on a Sunday morning when everybody's been sitting for such a long time and you realise you've been standing the entire morning.
You could do this on a Sunday, just wheel them in after worship.
Yeah.
Sit down.
We could, couldn't we? Think about that.
Order a couple of cups of coffee.
Paul did preach once on burn the sofas.
I did, yeah. Trust you to remember that, Ryan. That was 17 years ago. Yes, now I'm in my 60s. Let's keep the sofas. Anyway, so somebody called Paul, and it wasn't me, had this random idea, and I wrote it down and just followed through on it, that on Saturday afternoon we would have a question time. And so naturally, any of the hard questions will go to Paul. Any of the extremely hard questions will go to Sue, and I'll answer some of the easy ones. But yeah, so it's going to be a format. Alex over here is our helpful assistant. He has one of those modern funky things called a microphone in his hand. And yeah, it's even one of those ones without a wire. He will come to you if you have a question, and hopefully there are some questions out there, and we will do our best to answer. As Paul very wisely said earlier, if we don't know the answer, we will say, I don't know the answer. Because there's definitely some questions like that. But if you want to know about the economic and the imminent trinity, Michelle's your person, okay? Or maybe John, if that's what you were doing. Yeah, maybe John. John's just done a big essay for his degree on it. So, we'll get John up here. There's actually a space on the sofa for qualified academics, John. And you are nearly a qualified academic. Nearly. Actually, since we're mentioning that, that's a really good time to do a notice on the college. I don't know if you have heard, but Formation College is amalgamating with Moorlands College. So Moorlands College, their base is down in Dorset on the coast down there. Now, I am still in negotiations with, and there's a huge range of what might happen, but what the degree that we are part of and that we've taught of for about 10 years now will be overseen and run by Moorlands, and they're sort of adopting the Formation course as part of all of this. The Formation name will sort of fall to the ground, and it will be under Moorlands College. But if you are, or if you still have people that are interested in doing the BA in Theology, Mission, and Leadership, it will come under a slightly different name now, but it will basically still be a BA in Theology. You can get in touch with me here, either email from the website, or if you've got my number or whatever, give me a call, and I can help you how you'd go through that. And you could still, you still have the option of either doing most of the practical stuff in your home church, although we probably, if you're in another place, at the moment we may not be involved personally with you in that. You'll just be with Moorlands. And if you want to do the placement part and be supported by our team here, that also will still be possible. And you would apply to Moorlands, but we can chat about that more. But just, you're probably one of the groups that knows more about the fact that we've been doing the degree course than any others. So, and this is fairly new, newly released information. So that's where that's at. We certainly hope to continue to grow and develop it because it's always been part of Kingdom Faith mission to educate as well as everything else that we do for that BA qualification. And we are a bit involved with the MA as well. So if you want to know more, talk to me. But as I'd mentioned, it went together very well. So we are ready for deep theological questions. We're not too good on the magic roundabout, so I'd miss those ones out. It started at 6 o'clock, I think, did it? Or run till 6? I can't remember. I was very little. The news was at 6 o'clock, of course. Yeah, thank you, Kate. And rhubarb and custard, we're not too good at either. But everything else is open. No, I'm talking about the dog and the cat. That one. You're too old. Yeah, I'm not too old. Or I had children, one of the two. Right, we're open to more serious questions now. Was that a hand? No, that was a drink. oh, thank you, Brian. Thank you. Somebody's got a question. This is like DIY sermon. The bingo cards are also available for topics raised.
The Bible often talks to us about putting away childish ways, but have childlike faith. Why does the church struggle so much in that area?
I mean, I suppose there's an assumption that it struggles in that area. I mean, I think it's a good question. You got any thoughts?
I don't know. I would genuinely have to ask. Could you rephrase the question? Ask the question again. Because it was too focused. There was 2 points to it, wasn't there?
Yes, the Bible talks about putting away childish ways, but it talks about having childlike faith. Why does the church struggle with that in those areas?
Okay. Well, if you're throwing it over my way, I think my first point would be, Alex, to ask Brian, what do you see as the childish ways? Because otherwise we can't really answer the second part.
Yeah.
Let's put everybody else off asking a question ever.
Well, that comes from a place of your behaviour, as in being childish in the way we respond to things. But then having a childlike faith of where a child wouldn't think twice of maybe jumping off a chair or a table into his father's arms because he's trusts within the father.
I suspect that most of the problem is that it's a lack of teaching on the difference between the two, and probably a lack of modeling it, and that we tend to build out of more of an intellectual kind of framework of what we do in church and how we teach, rather than an experiential way. And so for me, modeling being childlike in our faith, in our hunger for God, in our not questioning everything, hasn't really been well modeled. And so, I mean, I think that would probably be where I would start. Is it needs defining, it needs modeling, and yeah, I mean, I think we all understand the childishness. We have to get rid of that, but we need to be childlike in our hunger, in our faith, in our not questioning first, but running after. So, I mean, I think that would be where I'd probably start. And I think you could start modeling it, really.
Well, Brian, personally, you could start modeling it. Now nobody's going to ask a question between us.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there are examples. I mean, you take somebody like Wigglesworth. So you've got stories with Wigglesworth where he had childlike faith. In other words, he was prompted by the Lord to do something and he didn't question it. So he just got on and did it. And I think that there's an element of that. And we tend to be, as human beings, we tend to be self-conscious. And I think what the instruction is about, we need to learn to be less self-conscious and more God-conscious, and be more spontaneous in, a little bit like the example I gave earlier, where I ran up on a stage, grabbed a microphone and said, 20 people put up their hand and give £1,000. I didn't think about it. That was pretty childlike. The funny thing was that when I got down from the stage, Sue said, I was going to do that if you hadn't. I'd loved it to have been both of us. It'd have been. So I think it's that. That's where I'd start. But I'm no expert on being childlike or childish, really.
Right, the key scripture that would is 1 Corinthians 13:11, where it says, "When I was a child, I taught like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we only see a reflection as in a mirror, then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully." But it's interesting that the context of that is very rarely put with what's just before it, because it's actually the part that we probably all heard at many a wedding. Love is patient, love is kind. Love, it does not envy, it does not boast. You know, that beautiful list. I won't read it all. But if you think about it, I think Paul is just following on in his thought pattern here. Because if we put a child in there, a child can be these things, but often children are not known for being patient. Children are very capable of being cruel, not kind. Children often get envious. Children often will boast about what they're good at and what they can do. It is not proud. You know, many children can be proud. I know we know damaged children could be the opposite, but it does not dishonor others. I mean, children are notoriously good at dishonoring others, but perhaps be being ruthlessly honest. I won't give you the judgment of what Samantha thought my shirt was like today. Though the oldest one thought it was really nice. So, you know, but no, I'm just joking there, but you're getting that picture. It is not self-seeking. Well, most children are. That's what being a child is, isn't it? It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. I mean, how many of you know how long a child can remember something where they were upset? So I think that some of what Paul is saying in that childish ways is the opposite of that 1 Corinthians passage, is what it is to be childish. And if we're going to walk in maturity, it's being what is written here. It's learning to be patient. It's learning to be kind and not just reacting to something that comes out because at first it seems different to the way we think. It's what Paul was talking about earlier. With tribalism is actually very childish. The way of, and we see a lot of this in government as well currently, don't we? Where if somebody is of a different political party to you, they can be considered your enemy. There's a podcast that Kate listens to, which has, what's the two people on the podcast, Kate? Can't remember the other guy. He was a top Conservative politician. So anyway, you've got a top Labour, which is George Osborne, and they do a podcast together. And they talk about worldly events and all kinds of things. If you really want to know more, talk to Kate. But she says what's remarkable is the two are friends, but they hold quite different views. And that's actually what we need in the world, that capacity to keep people as friends and to even just to be humane and kind and patient with people who have different views to you. They're not your enemy, they're just human beings. And to react as if, they've got a different point of view, they watch a different channel, they go to a different church, is actually very childish. Yeah. You know, and it's for me, when I read this passage, that's what Paul is saying. Let's let go of that and move on into the maturity of Christ. But the maturity of Christ is not having an MA or a BA in theology. It's living the word as it is. Does that help, Brian? Sorry?
I'll put it into practice.
So, yes.
Regarding questions, and sometimes, as we are believers, and not enough to questioning ourselves or so questions to, to raise the issues in the church and also to the Lord. And it doesn't necessarily, from God's point of view, we just because we childlikeness is just without put our trust in the Lord completely is absolutely fine thing. But actually, on the other hand, we have to know something and we can ask the Lord. And I feel that how can we deal as a church to this area?
Was there? I didn't quite catch the question.
The question is regarding questions, okay? And so, for example, if we ask some questions to the Lord, and so sometimes it doesn't necessarily God answers everything because He's perfect, our Lord, and so we just if God doesn't answer to that, then we have to wait and patiently, of course, and there is no doubt about it. But when we towards church and the church leaders and systems and the church and etc., we have to ask questions, a lot of things, and so then as a church, as a God's believers, how can we work together to ask these questions to deal with the, in an appropriate way?
So how can the body ask questions of leadership and find out about where the direction of the church goes and what's the right way to go about asking questions and to trust in what answers are.
Well, I guess that's quite a difficult question to answer in this context because probably every church is going to have a different method. This is not a common method for us, is it? Just to ask, we're asking questions now. But for me, and again, you know, it depends on how the church is structured, but hopefully it's going to have an open atmosphere where you can just talk to the leader, whether that's on a Sunday or you say, could we meet up? I want to talk through something, or even through a telephone call, something like that. And it's good to have that because otherwise these questions can, especially if it's something you're worried about or you're concerned with, or maybe you think there's something going on that's not right, or just something you don't understand, those kind of questions fester over time and make it more difficult for you to feel part of something. And it's quite shocking sometimes, if that is the right word, that questions that people have, actually they're not difficult to answer. And usually it's a misunderstanding. Oh, I see. No, I didn't mean that. This is what I meant. I'm sorry you took it that way or that you heard, but this is what I was trying to say. And then ultimately, there will always be times when we are in disagreement, but that's where we need to be patient and we need to love one another and see beyond the immediate disagreement into the fact that we still know that we are the one body of Christ. We are of one mind in that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior and Redeemer and died on the cross to enable us to be reconciled to the Father. All those things are going to be in place in any Bible-believing church. Hopefully it will just come out as, well, we've misunderstood one another, or it's something that's relatively easy to explain. But sometimes there will be disagreement between leaders and people because we always will be. We're all human, you know. And in a marriage, you don't agree on everything. So we'd be mad to think we agree on everything in this room. Did you want to add anything?
Structurally, if I was teaching a church, I would want them to have a structure where every member of the church knew a line of communication through a small group leader through to the leadership of the church. I think it's when Jethro advised Moses and said, if you don't sort things out, you'll kill yourself. And he organized the people into ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. And it's a simple model. I think often the church has failed to have some of the simple management structures that the world would take for granted, that police or nursing would take for granted. And I would say that if I was teaching a church, I would say, if at all possible, have a model of organization where everybody who's a regular attender knows that they can talk to somebody and ask questions.
That's good, yeah.
Can I ask any question?
I don't know. Shall we let him ask a question?
Is that the question? Can you ask any question?
No, I like to draw on collective experience. I've had some pretty spectacular prophecies in recent months on the prophetic and on healing. I've been praying for sick people for 45 years, but the scope of the prophecies are enormous. And it's just, could you help me take that step from where I am to where the Lord is prophesying I should be?
Well, I'll start. So this is my simple model. If I get given a prophetic word, I divide it into two, always, in my head. Brian gives me a word now, whatever it is, I will pause and I will divide it into two. And that will be, what can I do and what can only God do? And I'll always look at every prophetic word with that lens. So, you know, when we were given words, we're moving back to Europe, okay, we'll do this, but you'll need to do this. So I always start there with, is there something I need to be doing? Do I need to get some training? Do I need to get some more experience? Those are things that I can do. I have an outrageous prophetic word about healing, that I will see people healed in the last days of their life dying of cancer, and I will see people clutched from the jaws of hell and healed. So all I know is, if somebody talks to me about being in the last days of their life and I have some connection to them, I will probably pray for them. But I can't do the other part. So I'm just faithful with what he's given me to do, and then I trust him for what only he can do.
Thank you.
No, I'm just here keeping these two apart.
You're here for the stories, Sue. Yeah. You've always got a story.
I just don't have one about that.
No. Well, it looks like, if that's okay, Davis has got another question. Did that help?
Sue's other role in these is always she becomes the funny one. She just did it then. She said nothing, says one line, and people are all laughing. You're all happy and smiling. She does it every time. She answered a question at a conference, and she started talking about chocolate. Like, we walk out, there's been 4 other people on the stage, but what's everyone saying to me? Your wife is amazing. It's like, she was answering questions on chocolate. It's like, so that's what she does. She's funny. That's all it is.
Mine is a sensitive question, but both Pastor Paul and Paul Manwaring has touched on it. Yesterday I was told, I wasn't here, but I was told Paul Manwaring talked about a current world leader, and we know what he's doing currently. And Pastor Paul, a few minutes ago, just talked about political tribalism. Now, I just want to say this, just so we're all on the same page. I believe that, just as the Bible said, we're subject to higher authorities, and I believe that strongly. And I'm sure, I want to assume everyone here does. But we have seen what I would call systemic racism in the world today. It's not just in the UK, it's global. You see people talking about, oh, you're not part of us, you go back to your home, go back to your countries, deporting people and things like that, or using gimmicks to send people away. Now, we also know that there is the DEI, which, to a very large extent, we know it's just something that's put out there just to make people calm down a bit. It's not doing exactly what it's meant to do, or it says it will do. Now, my question is, what is the church doing about this, or what can we do about it? And I'm not asking what is our opinion about it, because clearly the Bible makes us understand that God loves all men equally. So my question is actually, what can the church do about this? What can we do about it? Because surely I'm certain that he's expecting us to do something about it. But what can we do about it?
I mean, there's many aspects to this question. Just in case there was any misunderstanding, I don't like Mr. Trump. But there are, and I'll just put this in context, when we talk to our friends in America, for many of them, there was no alternative but to vote for him because of some of the moral stuff that was happening under the Democrats. I'm not justifying either or the other, but the way news is reported, it literally, I get off a plane in America and my phone gives me a different story because of where I am. So, it's definitely not as simple as one's right and one's wrong. So in that context. So now where I would come in on, the world has acquired a problem. Now, in terms of, I've spent a lot of my life working in a multi-race environment, in prison for certain nursing. So it's been a huge part of my life. As far as I'm concerned, no matter color or gender, we should treat people with love, equality, etc., etc. End of discussion. I get very frustrated that the, some of the peripheral gender stuff gets, what's the word? I've lost the word, begins with C, but it gets drawn into the same discussion as women and race. Because for me, women and race are part of the original design of creation, as opposed to transgender, which isn't. So conflated's the word. I don't like them being conflated. As an overview, this has been, the world's got a problem. That we have definitely got, we've got problems in the areas of immigration and what have you, because Western world cultures are attractive and desirable for other cultures. So we've got massive influx, etc., etc. So there's a problem. I think it's important that we don't deny that we have a problem. This country has a problem. It then becomes how we deal with it, which is the political challenge. As far as the church is concerned, this is my way of approaching it. We've got a world that says I can go where I like. The boundaries of immigration, movement, extreme globalization, we've got people who believe they can go where they like. We've got people who believe they can do what they like, which is secularism. We've got people who believe they can say what they like, which is the effect of social media. And we've got people who can believe what they like, which is largely the effect of fake news, conspiracy theory, etc., etc. So we have four problems: go, do, say, believe. There's a world out there, but the apostolic assignment is to do what Jesus did, go where Jesus went, say what Jesus said, and believe what Jesus believed. So ultimately, what we need, I believe, the church needs to do, whilst we should be involved in government, our primary responsibility is to carry out the apostolic mission of Jesus. And so we have to approach it from that place. Now, there are, one of the other challenges I think that we're now seeing, which is, and I have to be careful how I say this, but it's the difference between multicultural and multi-ethnic. Multi-ethnic, I believe, is what we should be. But when we talk about the big cultures, I'm not talking about people's food preference cultures. I'm talking about the big religious cultures, multicultural at the level of Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, doesn't work. And there's no two ways about it. That doesn't work. So what we have to make sure that we do is that we are intentional about creating a healthy multi-ethnic environment, which I experience more here than the last time I was here. But at the same time, we need to be aware that a multicultural country, when you look at the sheer number of mayors in this country who are Muslim, that is creating a different problem. So we've got real problems, and we won't solve them by burying our head in the sand. But so that's roughly where I am on it. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. My headline is, what can we do about it?
Okay, I think this is what Paul would say. Another Paul.
You keep quoting that Bible thing.
I always do, yeah. I think this is what Paul would say to the church because, as you were just trying to express, even to talk about this subject is now so laden because it's so easy to say something that can cause deep offense where you really are trying not to. Or it will be taken in a way that you were definitely not saying because there are certain trigger words that can be used in certain ways, which of course is a plan of the enemy. Because if we can't even talk about it, how will we ever resolve it? So we have to be brave enough to talk in these situations. But I do believe absolutely and completely that to be loving and caring is to be careful with our language. You know, it's not, well, just say it as it is. I just put it how it is. I just say the truth. But actually, we're called to speak the truth in love. Yeah. We're not called, when we speak in the truth, it's not designed that we hurt people, and certainly not deliberately. But this is what I think Paul would say to us right now in this room with this question. And he would say, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep unity through the Spirit, through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. So in the church, if we're giving an answer to the world, the only answer to racism and all these other issues is to discover who we are in Christ, who we were actually created to be. And for the church then, it's to be, in these words here, demonstrating that to the world and pushing through every difficulty we will have. It's not just because you're black and I'm white. It's also because we come from different cultures. We use the same word, but in completely different ways. We can easily do something without knowing that's offensive, because of just small things, or at least small to one of the partners, but not to the other. I hope that makes... you can offend somebody because you walk into the house and you don't take their shoes off. Now, all my upbringing and culture was that you didn't take your shoes off because that was rude. And that's a very simple, perhaps a minor, but it could really upset somebody because their culture is that you always remove your shoes, and if you don't, you're being disrespectful. And mine was absolutely the opposite. My parents, I think, would have been shocked and horrified if somebody walked in and took their shoes off, because it was the feet that were offensive, not the shoes. So we've also, but to root that back in in real problems, although that could have been, we've got to keep talking. And if someone upsets us, we do also what's biblical. We talk to them, because like the earlier asking questions, the way we stay offended is to not try and be reconciled. And we have to admit that, I'm as responsible for this as they are, and I need to find out, how can we walk together again? What's gone wrong here? Because we will always come back to, but in Christ we are one. So there's a way back. There is a way to demonstrate that. And if we're going to show anything in the world, this is why it's so important in the church to always be living how God has called us to live, living a life worthy of our calling, because it will be seen. This place is open a lot during the week, and it's very common for people to say, they notice the love that is here. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we get so used to it, we don't even value and appreciate what we have. But others coming in, they look, they're watching the staff and the volunteers in here, and they see that difference. That's what we can do as the church, I think, above all other things. There was more questions.
Yeah, I think I've heard each one of you talk about being spiritual fathers and mothers to various different people at different times. Could you talk a bit about how that comes about? Is it an intentional thing on your behalf, going to them, they come to you, or is it more of an organic thing where you're growing together in those roles?
Is it on? Yeah. Here's a question. I might have something on. It's not too theological.
Are you going to be funny though?
No,
Are you
I
gonna
don't-
mention
I don't
chocolate?
know. I'm not going to mention chocolate. I think for Paul and I, when we went to America, it was the first time that we heard the phrase spiritual parents, spiritual mother and father. And then it just seemed that there were people that we got closer to. It's not really about an age thing. It's just a positional thing. So I think so we have maybe 4, what we would call our spiritual kids, who are also our friends. So we're much more invested in their lives. And we would talk, obviously spiritually, they can come to us, but we would talk to them about anything and everything because we're in their lives. I think sometimes, like, we found people will come up and ask, particularly would be to Paul, like students at Bethel, like, oh, I want you to be my spiritual father. And then, I just said to Paul, well, you need to turn it around on them and say, what does that mean for you? Like, what does that look like? Because otherwise you really are going to always fail people, because they have an expectation on something. And it's like, if somebody said to us right now, well, I want to have coffee with you once a week, I'm like, my son that lives down the road doesn't have coffee with us once a week because of busy lives. So we can't commit to coffee with you once, that kind of a thing. The one time it really did go wrong was, and we did really, really try hard with it, but this young woman came up to me on a trip we were taking somewhere, and she was a student. And she said, God said to me last night that you and Paul were to be my spiritual parents. So I said, oh, okay. So she said, and I said to God, no, thank you, I don't want them. So I'm like, okay. But she said, then God said, well, no, they have to be. So she said, there we go. I don't want you, but hey, God said, you're my spiritual parents. And I'm like, goodness me. So anyway, we started a journey with her. Every single bit of advice we gave her, she did the opposite. Every single time, including, it is not a good idea for you to date this young man at the moment with his issues, to, oh, you are dating him, okay. Now, do not rush into an engagement. Oh, there we go, there's an announcement on Facebook. Do not get married in a hurry. Oh, gosh, here's the wedding invite. It was that kind of a thing, and we walked her through lots and lots of scenarios. We loved her as best we could, but nothing was ever good enough. Nothing that we did was ever good enough. Walked her through 2 IVF pregnancies. I went to doctor's appointments. Nothing was good enough. We did that, and God only gave her a single pregnancy, as it were, 1 baby, and she wanted more than 1 in her womb. And so she was upset about that. There were so many things, and in the end there ended up being a massive breakdown in relationship because it wasn't working. And so there has to be a mutual thing on both sides, I think. And I think also everybody can be a spiritual parent to someone else, and it may just be like really just mentoring someone. Just getting alongside them. I mean, Heidi Baker in Mozambique would say, gosh, if you've been a Christian for a week longer than someone else, you can be their spiritual parent because you don't have as much time there to grow, before you do that. But I just think all of us can get alongside someone else and kind of have that role with also setting some boundaries, especially if it's new people to church you want to get alongside. It's like, well, what does it look like, I think, is the first question. Because, otherwise it can just fail. But the ones that are our true spiritual kids, they love us, they never take advantage, they never have unreal expectations. I mean, in a healthy way. It's not just like, whatever time you can give, I'm just, we see them as much as we can, and we're in their lives. We remember the kids' birthdays and our kids know them. Maybe that's another thing now, is that both our boys know who they all are, and they all actually like them, which is, quite a big thing. But they all know who they are, and they totally understand that somebody else's children think that we're their grandparents as well, and that's an okay thing. But you might have a more spiritual side to it.
Not necessarily spiritual. I think what you need, first of all, in the church is you need a culture of sonship and daughtership. And if you don't have that, then you'll create an expectation that nobody can fulfill. I can't possibly be a spiritual father to 1,000 people in school of ministry, but I can teach them a culture of sonship. And if they're not sons and daughters, they'll be critics, and you'll let them down. So that's the first one. Sue said the other one is our kids. One of the things that's really important to me is if somebody's a spiritual son of mine, I want them to know my sons. If someone's going to be a spiritual daughter of mine, they will be Sue's spiritual daughter as well. I will not have a spiritual daughter that's not Sue's spiritual daughter. That's an absolute personal rule. And I think that ours have, they are 3 or 4 couples that have unique life experiences and unique connections to us. They're not people who have already, model parent scenarios. So there's been a sense of us meeting a need in their lives as well. So I think you have to be very careful about it. It just happens to have been the way it's worked out with us. I mean, we spent Boxing Day with one of them. That's how close they are to us. We drove down and spent the day after Christmas Day with them. We're more like godparent. I mean, godparent would almost be, we're doing godparenting really properly, almost. It would be a way of saying it.
Hi, I'd like to ask Sue, as somebody who's been to the Big Church Festival, what's the 3 essential things I need to take?
A sense of humour. When we last went, it was a really lovely sunny day. When we went the time before that, when the church we go to on Sunday mornings went, I was just relieved I wasn't camping, because it was quite cold at night. Everybody was freezing at night, and then it rained. And the toilets. That's why you need a sense of humour. But I think that it's kind of an all-weather thing. So even if it's hot in the day, it might be freezing cold at night. So take warm stuff at night, otherwise you'll be miserable. And I think it's just like, I don't like camping at all, Kate. No, I see. So I think you have to kind of look on the bright side all the time and think, you know what? There's so much here that's amazing. It's just for the night,
It's longer now.
Is it? Yeah, I mean...
3 days now.
3 days. I mean, one of our spiritual kids, before, he wasn't married, and he went to a similar event on the Wiston estate, and it rained all the time, and his little air mattress deflated in the night, and he woke up thinking, I need to go to the loo, but it was because he was actually laying in muddy water, and he took himself off to the closest Premier Inn and decided he was never camping again. But it's an amazing atmosphere there. And kids are, like, your kids are going to absolutely love it. And they don't care getting cold anyway. But they're going to love it. And the atmosphere, there are non-Christians that go, apparently, because it is a fun thing. You know, they don't mind going because it's a fun thing. I think you should still keep your kids close to you based on that, to be honest. Like, don't just let a 5-year-old go and think we're all Christians here. But it is such a fun thing, isn't it, Paul? Like, you can get good coffee, which is very important, and there's lots of different food outlets. I mean, we were very excited to find a South African food one that sold stuff that we'd eaten with our friends inside. It made us think of them and miss them, you know, with the ostrich burger and things. And I'm like, oh, that's like, so there's lots of cultural things there of different nations' foods and things they do. So I think you guys are going to just have an amazing, fun time. And because you're all going together, I think that will help with the camping. If I was going, I'd be in an Airbnb, to be honest. But I think the people that camp do get that sense of almost like around the campfire. Like, I know when with the wildfires part of Big Church Day Out, I don't think it's connected anymore, is it? So our church used to do the wildfires part, the Pete Gregg bit. And so, again, you have your camping area for your church, and then you'd have your own area where you'd have a fire pit with bales of straw to sit on, which I'm not sure is that health and safety. But, and so you'd have your whole area. So churches were getting together then later in the evening and doing kind of around the campfire stuff. So I think make sure you have some of those times of just like talking about your day and just having those down times, fun times where you're not only talking about Jesus, you're getting to know each other outside of Jesus, because we can all do a good talk. You don't have to be in church long before you know how to say the right things. But I think when you're all together for a few days and you're camping and you're tired, you know what I mean? That's where you get to really know each other. And I know our church that did the camping, they absolutely loved it, but then they were a bit fanatical campers.
Yeah, I'm not a
Whereas
fanatical camper.
some of the less ones were in an Airbnb. But I just think go prepared for all weathers. And if you're going in the car, throw your wellies in as well as your sunscreen. Because say when we went, it was such a hot day, which was fantastic because you can be out the whole time. And I say the kids are going to love it. But I think the grown-ups love it because the worship's always incredible. And just to be able to sit in fields and you can just hear the worship and hundreds of people just praising Jesus is just incredible. So
the phone signal's rubbish on the Western Estate.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And take a good power pack. Those would be my 2 thoughts.
Oh yeah. In case your phone. But then if you're all together, it's not as bad.
In terms of being all together, Kingdom Faith have got like this. If you're going to go and you haven't yet booked, you need to book it from the Kingdom Faith website. So you go on the main website, www.kf.church, and you'll find there BCF or Big Church Festival, and then you click the book from that page. That takes you through to we will be they're using those numbers to create a space so that we can all be together.
Yeah.
However, there is a caveat to that. The tents are all together. It's not like Faith Camp in any way. There are no units, but we will be all together. But because of the way it is a festival, that's where it's come from, cars and vehicles are not allowed on the site where all the tents are, which is a great thing if you've got small kids. You've got no worries about cars and things driving around. But if you are going in a camper van or a caravan, you would be in another area. But of course, you can go between the two. I mean, Simon and Joe Breaker are going in their caravans, so we're going to continue to develop our friendship as well.
If it rains, you'll be
Yeah,
developing
yeah.
it very
if
well.
it rains, our friendship will become especially close, I
Yeah,
feel.
yeah, you do.
I don't know
park
whether
your-
Joe's listening, because she quite often does, but
Well,
sorry, Joe,
you
we're
park
humming
your
round.
cars and then you walk, but at least when you're there. But I think if people are thinking, I don't know, should I go, shouldn't I think even if you don't have children, go. It's not just for kids, it's for big kids as well. And I think when you're just sitting there in the evening in your little camping chair and you've got around like where the big stage is and you're listening to the worship, it's just, you're out there and you just see the stars and there's nothing much else apart from what's going on there. And it's just an amazing experience of being with just hundreds of other people. And I think definitely going as a group or camping together creates that feeling of family.
Yeah,
and so I
absolutely.
don't, yeah. And it's,
I think the one good tip in there is to invest in a battery pack, a decent one
Yeah.
for your phone. So there are places you can go and get them recharged, but that's going to be something that you want because you're going to get split up. And you want to meet up with friends, and that just makes it an awful lot easier.
And even it's like if your phone's not working, kind of know a place where, I mean, it's not so huge that you wouldn't be able to find a central place and say, look, if all else fails, we'll meet at that point at 6 p.m. or something, ready for the worship, or lunchtime or something.
Yeah, that's true.
But
I mean, some of you might say, no, I'm switching my phone off and I'm forgetting the world.
Yeah.
I mean, that's also another good alternative, I
I
would have
think
said.
you can. I think there's better chance of good weather, although bank holidays sometimes are a bit of a
It'd probably
washout.
it can be. It's in August, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it can be. But I would have thought probably the evenings, the nights might
I think
be
it's just
warmer.
it's not going to be as cold at night as it
Probably
used
not.
to be earlier in the year. But I just always think when you have a car, you can just throw so much more in, unless you've got half a dozen kids. But you can always put your wellies in and...
Anyway, any more questions on that?
Yeah.
There's a lot. Seems to have taken over. It feels like we've
Well,
turned
it's
into
all
an
right.
advert. But
No.
actually, the webpage, the Big Church Festival webpage, is brilliant. There's so much information on there about all the kinds of practical questions.
But I think, too, the stuff that you go to, the teaching,
Yeah.
you'll definitely come away like, I don't know what the word would be, but you're going to definitely, like, we used to go to Spring Harvest, and obviously that was always indoors, which is lovely. But you always knew that you were going to come home knowing more than when you went there.
Yeah.
And you were going to be encouraged, and you were deepened in your faith, all of those things. So I think that knowing that you're going to come back different and expecting for God to do something in your life. I think if we always go to stuff expectant, God will always show up and do something, whether it's church on a Sunday, this conference, camping in a field at a big festival. If you go thinking, I know God's gonna show up and do something in me, I think he will, because he's not in the habit of letting us down like that.
Oh, and I suppose somebody might be thinking here, well, I'm not really part of Kingdom Faith, so I can't do that. You're here, you can. Once you just turn up to one meeting, your family. Yeah. So no, in all seriousness, you can.
Kingdom Faith.
Yeah, and come along on so Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning. There's nothing else particularly happening other than the children's work in the mornings anyway. Yeah. So it's during a time when there's not so much going on in terms of organised activities. It's 2 hours, basically, Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to meeting up with the wider family again, because obviously we haven't done it since 2018. Yeah, so that's going to be quite something. Alex has got a question.
Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of talk about revival, and particularly as a result of a survey by the Bible Society, talk about quiet revival. Now, I've been praying for revival since I was a teenager, and I believe that God said to me, even at that age of 14, that I was going to see revival in my lifetime. So I'm quite excited about that. But I've come to realise that the revival, if it happens, and I'm not saying it is or hasn't, it's got to start with me. It's got to start, first of all, with me. I've got to be revived. Once I'm revived, then that hopefully will spread to the church that you're in, and then will spread even further from that. But I just wonder what your thoughts on that was. I'll just share a very brief testimony. At the beginning of this year, God said to me, you need to start getting real about your faith, and you need to spend more time with God. And so at the beginning of this year, I said, okay, God, I'm going to start being real with you. I'm going to spend more time with God. And I can honestly say, I've never spent more time over the last 5 months in all of my Christian life. I've never spent the time that I'm spending now with God. And the difference it's made to my life has just been phenomenal.
Amen. You're looking at me expectant. I suppose Kingdom Faith has always been associated with revival. If you don't know who Colin Urquhart was, he was the founder of Kingdom Faith, and I think he lived to see revival. I think revival's here already in this nation. I think it's here. It's more a case of stepping into what God is doing, because while I'm equally certain that revival is here, I'm equally certain that this revival won't look like what we think it will look like. You know, we can look back to previous times of things. Revival is literally the church coming back to life, and because the church is alive, it changes nations. That's revival in my book. It's renewal and it's revival all at the same time. So revival means the dead church is coming back to life. Well, there's been elements of that really since the charismatic move in the 1970s, but we've definitely stepped into another era. I think Paul was talking about being a new era. We've talked about that, but I think this whole nation and the whole church has moved into something new post-lockdown. At first, a lot of it was negative. People didn't turn up anymore. They'd broken the habit of going to church, and so they didn't go to church anymore. And the church fell in numbers. Actually, it's probably the healthiest thing that's happened to the church for many a year, because it meant that those that were there because that's where God had called them to be, had got the opportunity to move forward together with what God had said to them, answering the call of God. My prayer is those people will come back on fire and want to move back on with God. And yes, that's what I think. We're in revival, and you're absolutely correct. The question really is, how am I stepping into it? And you're choosing, right, I need to spend more time with the Lord. And what's the fruit of spending time with the Lord? How does that translate to you bringing new life to the church and to the world? I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but that's the one I've got at the moment.
I mean, I'm with Paul on it starts with me, it starts with you. My favourite definition of revival is when renewal goes viral. I like that.
You always got a clever phrase, Paul. I love your phrases.
So, that would be where it starts. For me, I would then add revival then is when ones to millions of people come into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, his person, his power, his presence, and his principles. But if it stops there, it's fallen short. It has to lead to reformation. We have to see societal transformation. So I'm looking for revival that becomes a reformation, and that in the reformation there is a restoration of Judeo-Christian government in our lands. So I think there are many aspects of revival that are here. There's a really good book called The 10 Greatest Revivals. I think that's what it's called, the 10, forget the exact title, but it's got 10 greatest revivals in it. And one of the most interesting things is at the front, it lists definitions of different revivals. So there have been like worship revivals or prayer revivals. And I don't know whether I'm right or not, but I have a sense that the revival that we're beginning to see amongst the Gen Z is a revival of the word and truth. and I think it's the great need. So we could talk about it, but I'd get that book. 10 Greatest Revivals is a really interesting book, very inspiring.
How many of you want to see revival? That's good. The one thing I observed in the 90s, when there was lots of talk of revival, and there were various movements, there was like the Toronto movement, wasn't there, and others, Brownsville. But often what people wanted revival for was kind of to make it easy. I think there was a very strong sort of thought that if you got revival, not the people that are actually living in those moves, because I think it would have been true, they would have realized, they knew, but people wanted revival because they assumed that when there was revival, that it would be easy. Because of the miracles and the healings and everything that God is doing, we'd kind of just be ushering people in, and it would all be amazing. If you want revival, it will be the most costly thing you've ever endured in your life, both in terms of time, money, and just it will be hard work. It will be amazing, but it will also be full of problems and issues, because you'll see lives being changed that have been through horrible things, and often people journey rather than an instant change. So we'll be walking with them in that. And if we're going into revival, I want to see revival, that means everybody has to answer that call to be spiritual parents. And you heard some of what they expressed. I don't know if you also noticed alongside that, there's a cost. It's not a cost of a cup of coffee a week. It's far greater than that. It's people whose lives you're investing in. And if churches are to grow, there must be people who are there saying, I will befriend, I will parent, I will disciple, because you certainly can't leave it to a paid crew or a group of leaders. It won't happen. It's the whole church has got to embrace, I want to see revival, I will work to see revival. It also goes back to what Paul said earlier about prophecy. The first question is, you divide it into two. What can I do and what is God going to do? It's the same with revival. What am I doing now to be prepared and ready and stepping into revival? Because God will actually cause the revival. It will be his move of the Spirit that I believe is already happening. But you have to answer, so what am I doing to be part of that? It might be that there is some form of training. It might be that you need to get involved with something you've never been involved before. And top of that list would be, if you've been a Christian longer than 2 weeks, you need to be thinking about what of that wisdom, knowledge, experience, love that you've had in your life are you now already sowing into the lives of others? Because that will be revival. One will tell another. One will tell another. And they won't expect somebody else to get on with it. And they won't be thinking that the Holy Spirit's just going to sweep through the town. Everybody's going to fall over. Everybody's suddenly become a fully paid up member of the church. It's going to be something where the church says, I will answer that call. That was I think probably we're, I see children reappearing. There's evidence over there. That's definitely a young person. And Jem's done. So it's gone 15:15. So I think we will draw to a close. Is that all right? Yeah. In terms of this evening, if you're not quite sure of when we are happening, I have a little bit of paper here that everything is